Payton Sandfort is back with the Iowa Hawkeyes. What does it mean for Iowa hoops? Are they back being an NCAA tournament team? We break it down, take a look at the minutes, and talk some hoops today. Locked on Hawkeye.
You are Locked On Hawkeyes, your daily podcast on the Iowa Hawkeyes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, welcome in. I'm Trent Condon, and this is the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. Thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. We're available wherever you find podcasts, and you can also watch us on YouTube. While you're there, hit the subscribe button. Just takes you a moment and helps us get in front of more Hawkeye fans. Well, the big news that we've been waiting for finally was announced late into the evening as Payton Sandfort will come back into Iowa City for his final season of eligibility. Now, this is not a huge surprise by any means. We've been hinting at that and the rumblings that have been out there recently, but it went into the final hours of a decision that had to be made. This had to be put in by 10:59 Central Time, and it wasn't until about 9:30 that Payton Sandfort released a Instagram post that alerted the masses that he would be staying with Iowa, not entering the NBA draft. Look, the impact for this is immense. Without Payton Sandfort, I don't believe this Iowa team had a realistic shot of being an NCAA tournament team. Of course, we're going into the newfangled Big Ten next season. As I was reading a few things about the future of the Big Ten and what it's going to look like next season, a lot of roster shuffling happening. It's very difficult to get a real good read on everything with all these moving parts and what it's going to look like. But one of the first articles that I was reading in preparation and kind of seeing where they had some of the other teams placed and knowing that the news of Sandfort's return wasn't going to be in there, they had Iowa 18th. That's right, out of 18 teams. With the additions of USC, UCLA, Oregon, Washington next season, before any of the transfers either happen for Iowa, though the departures were there with Tony Freeman and Patrick McCaffrey. This particular publication had Iowa 18th. Now, I think that's ridiculous. I mean, it's absolutely asinine that you would do that with this program, what Fran McCaffrey has done. And, you know, at times I think we forget that the ceiling has not got to where we want. We have not been able to break through and get into that second weekend and do what many of the things that we're hopeful for this Iowa program and bring back some of the great memories. And as we're going on now 25 years since the departure of Dr. Tom Davis in the last Sweet 16, we certainly know all that, but the floor is not that. Fran McCaffrey is not going to have a team that is going to fall apart at that level. I mean, look at this past season. A team that I didn't think was realistically going to be even a bubble team this season, and he had that. And there were opportunities late in the season, the games against Illinois, that could have been the difference in putting this team back into the NCAA tournament for the 6th consecutive season. It didn't happen. But to even have them in that opportunity, you go into March with a realistic chance of being an NCAA tournament team, says a lot about his coaching acumen and says a lot about what he has done in building this program. It doesn't have those kind of craters. It doesn't have that kind of collapse. And to think that Iowa is going to finish in 18th place out of 18 teams in the Big Ten, it's just absolutely ridiculous. Well, this changes all of that. Now, since then, of course, they've gone out to the transfer portal and added, at minimum, a couple of nice pieces. These are not guys that are going to be showing up on a bunch of a top 25 or 30 prospect lists in the transfer portal. That's not what you're going to see with Traore and with Thelwell. That's not what they are, but they are pieces that fit exactly what Iowa needed, and that's a reason for excitement. But let's start first with Payton Sandfort and him coming back. The NBA draft combine did not go very well, and we definitely saw that. And there were some excuses out there. Hey, this is not the kind of place that he's going to thrive, even in the scrimmage opportunities. He's not a drive guy. He's a catch and shoot, and having teammates that are going to set you up, having point guards that are going to get you the ball, just having those kind of experiences and playing in that kind of scrimmage environment is not set up for a player like Payton Sandfort. And though there is a bit of truth to that, I think that part was overstated. He played poorly, and that's okay. Certainly for our standards, that's really okay because we're happy for that because he's back in Iowa City. But the other part about it that I think too many people were missing is just how poorly he tested and a lot of those physical attributes. I mean, the running and the jumping and those kind of things, it wasn't just bad for a guy. It was just bad, period. Some of the lowest numbers that we've seen across the board for a guy that's going to be a two guard, maybe a swing guy at the next level, a guy that has never been known as a great defensive player. He's a good rebounder for a guy his size, and we know what he can do shooting the basketball and that quick release of what it's going to be. But reason for optimism continues. And now this will be an offense that is built around two main pieces. And you're going to have Payton Sandfort. You saw the emergence we saw from Chris Murray a couple of years ago. He had a similar decision to make. Were there a potential team or two that was looking at him as a first rounder? Possibly. But most everybody had him as a second round pick. And instead, he came back, had a great season, and went on and was a first round draft pick by the Portland Trailblazers. You saw that. And I think you're going to see a system that is very much set up to continue to do some of the things Payton Sandfort is so good at, and get those numbers up and get the shooting at a more consistent level. We saw a big improvement between his sophomore and his junior year. You go back from his freshman season to what he put together during his sophomore campaign. We saw big leaps. And though at this point, you don't anticipate those leaps are going to be as immense, there are a few things that he can do. First of all, we saw a big increase in terms of shooting this season. And he went from that slump that he had as a sophomore year, still finished the season shooting 34% from three. He shoots 38% this past season. Would love to see that number pushing past 40%. That's going to be his calling card at the next level. Mentioned the rebounding, something that is very good. He's also got to show it on the other end of the floor. He's got to be a better defender. And now this is across the board. And as we talk a little bit more about the team as a whole, that's going to come up. But Sandfort has to show next year that Payton is going to be a better defender than what he's shown certainly throughout the course of his career. A little bit more maybe versatility to his offensive game, not just being that shooter, the pull-up game, working off screens. We know how good he is at that, but some other components to his game. Is there more that he can add going into his final season in a Hawkeye uniform? And plus the opportunity to play more with his brother for another season. You have to realize that that's going to be a big calling card for him as well. I just think overall that is something that is going to be just great for the guys and great to have that opportunity. Now, how much are they actually going to be playing together? Well, that gets interesting. And you look at the roster and you look at the construction of this team and the way that they're set up. I'm not sure how much exactly we're going to see them and maybe how many minute increases we're going to see coming up this season for Pryce Sandfort. We'll talk about that and this team. I believe now with Payton Sandfort back in the fold, Iowa is a bubble team at minimum, and I think they're going to be on the right side of the bubble. In the right after the NCAA tournament came out, bracketologist Joe Lunardi of ESPN, I'm sure you all know him, he came out with his 68-team bracket, and he also threw in his first four out and his next four out. There are a lot of Big Ten teams in there. Iowa wasn't among them. I believe that will change. We'll talk about how that's going to happen, break down the minutes a little bit, how this roster is going to look coming up this season, plus more basketball talk a little bit later on. We talk WNBA, Caitlin Clark. Things got a little bit more difficult for her in the coming weeks. Plus, Kate Martin, what a story of what she's doing with the two-time defending champion Las Vegas Aces. We'll do all that as we continue. This is Locked On Hawkeyes. Today's episode of Locked On Hawkeyes is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. It's winner take all time in the NBA and NHL, and FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on everything that they have on FanDuel. Point spreads, money lines, player props, futures, and a whole lot more. You like those same game parlays? They got you covered. They're all over the place. Currently looking at the big game tonight as it'll be game 5 back in Minnesota. The Timberwolves currently a 4.5-point favorite. You can jump in there. They already have college football lines out coming up this season and futures on the Iowa Hawkeyes and a whole lot of other teams. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Kind of back with you again here on the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. Thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. Hit that subscribe button if you're watching us on YouTube. If you're on the podcast side, just listen in audio only. That's A-OK. We love you over there as well. Make sure you give us a 5-star review. Greatly appreciate each and every one of you that help us out and help us get into those computers and get those metrics going and pushing us forward. We push forward here on Locked On Hawkeyes. And now let's take a look at what we have coming up with this team this season. As you kind of break things down and look at the roster construction, I think one thing really jumps out, and it is the depth that you have in the front court and the depth that you have at the power forward position, at the center position, even in a way at small forward. This isn't a team that is very deep in guards. And we know guard play wins come March, but at minimum, I think you feel pretty good. And this is going to lead to potentially some interesting lineup combinations. So as you look at first Payton Sandfort coming back next year, you anticipate he's going to be probably in the range. And we're talking not all the non-conference games, but we're talking about the close competitive Big Ten games throughout the course of the 20-game landscape coming up this season. You're looking 33, 34 minutes. And as you put all these numbers together, also have to realize in the box score, you only have 200 minutes available, right? 5 positions, 40-minute game. Very simple math. That is 200 minutes, and that's what we're working towards. So I put Payton Sandfort down for 33 minutes per game. Drew Thelwell, I had it down for 22. I have him slightly more than Brock Harding. And is there going to be moments where both of those guys play together? I think so. And that's why I have Brock Harding a little bit higher than the 18 left at the point guard position. I have him at 20. I think you're going to see that. Foul trouble crops up, that kind of thing. And it just goes to show you again the lack of depth in the guard position for this Iowa basketball team. Next on the list, speaking of the backcourt, is the starting 2 guard, and that is Josh Dix. Dix, I put at 27 minutes a game. That is a number that probably is maybe even going to be a little bit higher this season. We saw that great stretch of games. What do you have? 6-7 games where he was as hot as anybody, not just in the Big Ten, but anybody in college basketball shooting, and what a high offensive system that he was playing at. And I think untapping even more of that potential and getting the consistency that you need out of Josh Dix, I think you can see a big, big step forward for him coming up this season. And then you get into, what do you do with Pryce Sandfort? You know, is he going to be able to play 2, 3, those 2 positions? Is he able to carve out a role and find some kind of niche on this team? I just put him down for 10 minutes. And the reason for it is I'm so intrigued by the big guys. And I want to see what kind of combination these guys can work together. You know, you're going to want Owen Freeman out there as much as possible. And Owen Freeman, foul trouble was a big issue for him during his freshman campaign. It was really a time that was very debilitating for this team. Left him out there. There were some silly fouls. There are fouls that you just can't have. You love his aggressiveness. You love that we actually have somebody that will try to block shots and be an attacker. And I think at times playing with a guy that just was not a good defender at all, nor a good rebounder, and Ben Krikke, I think that hurt him at times also. Really good on the offensive end, but on the other end. Speaking of Owen Freeman, continued to hear great things about the work that he is doing to improve his range this season. Look, this past year, he was basically a back-to-the-basket kind of guy. And yes, he had some moves down in the post and those kind of things. We saw a couple of long jumpers, you know, the 15, 16-footers that he attempted throughout the course of the year. I think you're going to see more of that range. He's going to be much more comfortable doing it that season. And if you untap that, now you're cooking. But the rest of the guys is what's really interesting to me. And you talk about the 2 incoming freshmen, Cooper Koch, who I think is going to find a role on this team. I put him down for 12 minutes a game. Same thing with Chris Taggio. And Taggio's the guy that we just don't know a whole lot about. He was playing in the NBA Developmental Skills Academy that he was playing with. I know a lot of people in the recruiting world really like him, love his upside, the way that he rebounds, the defense that he plays, and the possibility with that skill set with Fran McCaffrey, who is such a great offensive coach, what he's going to be able to do with a guy like that. But he's just so raw and unknown at this point in time, and how it's going to translate this quickly during his freshman campaign. Another guy we got to talk about is Laji Dembele. And we saw glimpses a year ago of Dembele, a chance to be a really good player. Overall, the shooting numbers were pretty bad last season for him. But a part of that I really did enjoy is he wasn't scared. He wasn't scared of the moment. He wasn't scared of the big shots. Comes in, he's ready to go. And that kind of confidence, I think, is something that's incredibly impressive. That's another thing that Fran does a really good job of instilling confidence in his guys. I think he did a great job of that with so many guys throughout the time that it's very rare that you see a guy that is just out there that doesn't know, that doesn't have that confidence to put up the shot. He's going to put you out there. He anticipates that you're going to be ready to go offensively. And I think Dabale definitely has that. What more can be unleashed? He knocked down a couple of three-pointers this season, the range, the physicality that he can play with. I think a lot of good things there. I put Dabale down for 15 minutes a game, and that might be low. It's just because of what you have with Koch, with Tajo coming in. And then the other one, the Manhattan transfer, and Seydou Traore. So Traore, I think, is one of the more intriguing guys that I was brought in. Talk about Tajo's athleticism. And though Traore is not at the same level, this is a different kind of athlete than we're used to in Iowa City. And just overall, this skill set is much different than what we had. And as we talked about earlier in the week here on Locked On Hawkeyes, everydayers, you're going to remember this one. Just talking about, is this maybe a shift in the philosophy of what I was looking at and looking for going forward? Potentially. He's one, though, I think that is difficult to kind of carve out what this is going to look like. And the other question is, so who starts? Who's your starters now? Yes, the old adage, it doesn't matter who starts, it's who finishes the game. All right, whatever. For here and now, the starting line. I believe it will be Drew Thelwell, the transfer from Morehead State. He'll be the starter at the point guard position, with Brock Harding still playing a bunch this season. Josh Dix, lock at the 2. Payton Sandfort, a lock at the 3. Owen Freeman, a lock at the 4 or 5. Probably the 5, because most of these other guys, you don't have another true center out there. So you're left with a power forward. And if it plays out in that fashion, or even if you want to flip-flop Harding and Thelwell, more power to you. But we're still waiting for one spot. Is it Dabale, the guy that will have the most Iowa experience going into next season? Definitely could see that. Is it Seydou Traore, the Manhattan transfer? Is he the guy that gets that starting spot at the 4? I would love to see it. If you put Thelwell out there, Dix, Sandfort, Traore, and of course Owen Freeman, that's going to be one of the better defensive teams that Iowa's had in quite a while. Now you got to teach it right. You have to actually want to invest the time and the effort into that end of the floor. And there's times that you definitely question that when you watch Iowa basketball. But I just think when you look at the skill set of those guys and what they've been able to do in the past, it gives you an opportunity to really be, at minimum, an okay defensive team. And we've seen when I was okay on the defensive end of the floor, if they can all of a sudden get it even into the top 75 of college basketball, where they've been in the hundreds for most seasons in defensive efficiency, you're going a really long way. Here's another thing. As I was looking through some numbers earlier today, and this one really jumped out. Talk about the losses. It was, I know for a lot of people, incredibly just odd that Patrick McCaffrey decided to leave and leave before his final season, playing for his father. I know that created some headlines. I didn't see it as a big deal. There's something that I think we knew was going to happen, and it played out in that fashion. However, this was really interesting. Again, I like efficiency numbers. I think they paint a better story than just strictly points per game and those kind of things. In terms of offensive rating last year, your best player on the team was Josh Dix, 127.7. That's elite. Next up, Owen Freeman, a 125.2. And then Payton Sandfort, third on the list at 123. So you're bringing back your 3 most efficient offensive players in offensive rating from a year ago. Not only that, Freeman was your best defensive player in defensive rating from a season ago. Dabale, out of the regulars, or quote-unquote regulars, was second on the team. Even Brock Harding was up there higher than some of the other guys. Desante Bowen, Patrick McCaffrey, he was higher than those guys on that list. And then you throw into the mix these guys. As I said, I think this is a tournament team. I really do. Now, it's going to be fun to see what Fran comes up with in the non-conference schedule, how that comes together, and we got you covered when that thing comes out. Really interested to see. Of course, across the state, Iowa State, their non-conference schedule came out today. They're going to Maui this season. A great field will be there. The Iowa State Cyhawk game this season will be back in Iowa City. But their bye games were some of the worst teams in college basketball, as they did a year ago, and it maybe hurt them. Iowa, I don't want to say they figured it out, but they beat the system before a lot of teams started to catch up and what you do with the net system now as opposed to the old RPI. It's an argument that used to absolutely baffle me. Fred McCaffrey's a smart guy. He went to an Ivy League school. He went to Penn. He went to Wharton Business School. And how he could be so confounded by the numbers when he played in the old RPI system, those dregs of college basketball, the worst of the worst. It would absolutely kill your non-conference strength of schedule. Well, Fran didn't evolve in the way that he schedules. They still play those dregs. The good news is, though, in the new system with the net, if you play those teams and you beat them by 50, it is going to greatly help you in terms of the net ranking. Your strength of schedule is not going to be any better. It's not going to look good, but that doesn't matter as it pertains to the net. Margin of victory is capped at 10, but what is not capped is efficiency numbers. Now, is the NCAA going to tweak that? There has been some talk about that. We saw some teams in some conferences that were maybe trying to skirt the rules, if you will, and try to play around them. But Iowa in those bye games, they take care of business. They're going to be really, really good again in terms of the net ranking. And that's something that has helped them get into the tournament many years as opposed to the way that it hurt them with the old RPI system. Wrapping things up on a basketball-heavy edition of Locked On Hawkeyes. Don't worry, we got football coming your way later this week as we will be talking on a little bit with our recruiting guru here with Locked On as we will break things down as we always do with Brian Smith. A lot of football recruiting. A look at a couple of guys coming in here just a week away from the freshmen that have not already been on campus, making their way to campus, a couple more prospects, and look forward. A couple of defensive back commitments that I was looking for, a couple of Florida guys where Brian is based out of, so we'll talk about that and a whole lot more. So plenty of football, don't worry, coming your way here later in the week on Locked On Hawkeyes. Finish things up, though, with a little WNBA talk. I'm not alone. I've been watching a lot of Caitlin Clark, but it's not only Caitlin Clark. I've been watching a whole lot more Kate Martin than I anticipated was going to be the case. We'll talk some hoops. What's going on with Caitlin and Kate in the WNBA as we roll through. This is Locked On Hawkeyes. Trent Condon back with you one final time here on the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. Thanks for being with me. Hit me up on Twitter at Trent Condon. You can also follow the show account at Locked On Iowa. Kate Martin, Caitlin Clark. We've talked about this before. The story of Kate Martin going to the WNBA draft, getting to hang out with her teammate, watching Caitlin go number one, that was great. They call her the glue. And Kate Martin did all the little things. Eventually, she's going to be a coach. That's what she wants to do. Her aunt is Jan Jensen. Definitely something that makes a whole lot of sense. Is there going to be a spot down the road, maybe on the Iowa bench for her, starting out as a grad assistant? Don't be surprised when we get to that point that it's going to happen. But suddenly, there's been a whole lot more basketball for Kate Martin than, frankly, I ever thought was going to happen. Seeing her selected in the second round was great. And I thought that was going to be it. I think a lot of us learned this a year ago with Monica Czinano and just how quickly her dream of playing in the WNBA came to an end. It's tough. 12 teams, 12 roster spots, 144 spots for the best players in the world. That's all that's available in the WNBA. And Kate Martin, though we saw so many great things and what made her a great teammate, doing the dirty work, doing all those kind of things was a huge component of her play, her style, and her importance to Iowa basketball. But she's going to the two-time defending champion Las Vegas Aces. Now, eventually we found out that that's helped her as they were looking with the salary structure of the WNBA, looking for a couple of minimum salary players, a couple of rookies that they could put on those rookie contracts. And that did help. But the same thing. All right. It goes from nice moment. She got to hear her name called. All right, that was cool. But that's going to be basically it. She'll go to camp. She'll learn a little bit from Becky Hammond. And then she'll be on and she'll be working to find a job coaching women's college basketball, right? Being an assistant coach somewhere, being a grad assistant, that was going to be the route she was going to take. Not so fast. As we get deeper and deeper into camp, Kate Martin's got a chance to make this team. And then Kate Martin makes the team. There's another story. How amazing is this? The glue has actually made the team. But she's not going to play, right? Not so fast. She's playing and playing at a high level. If you're watching over the weekend against the Fever, you saw just that. 12.7 rebounds in that one, knocked down a couple of three-pointers. Then on, what would have been the 29th, she's knocking down shots all over the place. 3 of 6 from downtown, 9 points, 3 rebounds, 2 assists. She's doing Kate Martin things. It's astonishing. It really is. For a player that came in without much fanfare, one of the more lowly recruited players in comparison to what you normally see from Iowa women's basketball. Even go back a year ago and the decision that her and Gabby Marshall had to make if they were even going to come back for another season. They do, and now we're seeing what's happening with Kate Martin. Just absolutely awe-inspiring. Caitlin Clark, there's been frustrations, and she played very well again the other night, had 30 points, a career high. You're seeing her become more comfortable. This physicality is real. Some of the things that some of the both former and current WNBA players were talking about during the course of the end of her career at Iowa, I think are coming to fruition. Maybe we were too quick to just think that this was going to be easy. And I never thought it was going to be easy. I knew there were going to be growing pains. Those growing pains, though, have frankly been a little higher than I thought. It's been more difficult than I thought. And I did think there were going to be struggles, but the physicality is real. The jealousy is real. And the ineptitude of her coach is real too. Boy, some head-scratching moments. And not just, hey, I'll be the one that gets the technicals. Not the long twos, though both of those things are head-scratching and head-shaking along with it. Substitution patterns. End of quarter situations. End of game situations. As they get beat late, all these games start to run together. But it just, all these things together. Christy Sides, it's not long for this league. And not long, I don't believe, for the Indiana Fever job. The blame's going to go somewhere. And you can't fire the players, right? We'll see what Indiana does on this one. I would like to see a system more geared to Caitlin Clark. I'm sure that this has been a lot on her. Not just what she went through the course of the season, but for any rookie to have to quickly turn around and get ready for this. And yet with all these things being said, the growing pains that we're seeing, she's still putting up, for a rookie, ridiculous numbers. And she's still doing things we haven't seen before from a rookie in the WNBA. Maybe we have to remind ourselves about that from time to time. Thanks for being with us here, Locked On Hawkeyes, your team every day. We got you covered on the Hawkeye front, and not just the Hawkeyes. We got a whole lot more across the Locked On network. If you're a fan of a baseball team, the Cubs, the Twins, the Royals, we got you covered there with Locked On each of those teams. Your favorite NFL team, NBA, NHL, you name it, we got it here on the Locked On Network. Locked On has also launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV in the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channels app. Back with you tomorrow. We got plenty of Hawkeye talk on the football front coming your way. Make sure you join us each and every day. Hit that subscribe button on YouTube. 5-star reviews if you're on the podcast side of things. Thanks for being with us here today. Go Hawks.